Okay, guys, here is chapter 1 for healthy family systems. Let me start by saying that we have a new grandbaby and introducing you to Caden. He was born yesterday at 7 p.m. and he was 7 pounds 10 ounces, 21 inches long, and he is beautiful and perfect. So my wife and I holding him. This is one of my daughters holding him. That was this morning. He's sucking his thumb now. This was at the hospital last night, and this is my father. We call him Gramps. And Deborah Jo, my second to the oldest, was my oldest that had the baby, and here's mom and dad. Yay! I am so excited, and I appreciate in advance y'all being excited for me. I emailed everybody, but I didn't send pictures with the email, so there you go. Okay, so it has been a crazy last few days, primarily because of the baby. So I have um, Healthy Family Systems chapter 1 only right now. I will work on chapter 2 and get it out to you guys as soon as I can. I teach on campus tonight, and it's just crazy. So y'all just bear with me. And let me also just say that I really want you to be looking over your assignment, and I want you to use what we talk about in here to be thinking about your process paper. Hopefully you are beginning to think about that, and if not, I want you to, because you can use a lot of the terminology. I want you to use a lot of the terminology out of the textbook. I want you to think as though you were a Bowenian theorist. Just for the purposes of this class. You may or may not like um, Bowen. You may or may not like the theory. That's fine. Obviously don't have to. But I want you to learn to think like any given theorist as you learn. If you've been in theory class, if you haven't, you'll experience that. If you have, then you're already with me on that. Okay, so his foundational concept, he has 8 basic concepts, and his foundational concept is differentiation of self. And there's a lot of just detail in this book, as if you've begun to read, you've noticed. I don't view my job as teaching you everything, going over everything. I view my job as giving you highlights and overview. So if you're looking at the reading the textbook and listening to the PowerPoint presentation, the video, as you should be, then you're going to notice like, well, he didn't talk about everything. It doesn't mean it's not important. It's just I'm not going to talk about absolutely every detail. So if there's something that you want to know more about or you have questions about that I did not cover, then feel free to contact me and we can talk to it over the phone or whatever we need to do. Um, so one of the things that for some of you it may be new to think in terms of the family system, and some of you it may not be quite so new. When we think about culture, some of our cultures are much more aware of how our family affects us and how what we do affects our families, and then other cultures are much more individualistic and not as aware of our actions in the context of our family. So this may be a new way of thinking for some of you, and it may fit like a glove for others of you. And either way, here we go. And I am really tired right now, but I'm super excited. Yeah, I always wonder, are they looking at me going, man, he looks rough, or is he okay, or is he tired? Yeah, it was a very late night last night. In fact, on my way home from the hospital, at about 10:45, I had a flat, and I was 30 minutes from home, and I could not change it. I didn't have the tools I needed. It's a long story, but my neighbor actually came and brought me some tools, and we changed the tire and up and going. But I didn't get home till like midnight and got ready for bed. And of course, we had to look at pictures of the baby and talk about the baby. And so I don't think I got to bed till 1 and got up at 7 this morning. So that may not sound bad to a lot of you, but man, whew, plus all the emotion of the baby yesterday, I am wiped out. So y'all just bear with me, and I appreciate y'all, and I'm excited. Okay, so I like this little picture. I like using pictures just for fun, but because it's this, oh, there's an individual like sticking out, right? Like, oh, uh, and so, yes, we want to establish a sense of self and establish some sense of individuality, and yet, and according to Bowen, again, you can agree or disagree, and yet it is not outside of the context of the family. In fact, he even goes as far as to say is the self doesn't even exist without the context of the family. So it's not like um, he also says that this concept is very misunderstood. He said, you know, you're just, people have accused him of, well, you're just trying to teach people to emotionally distance themselves from the family. And he's like, no, that's not it at all. What he's trying to do is teach people to function um, at a healthy level of independence, at the same time being very connected to and in deep, intimate relationship with as many family members as possible, including extended families. And so tuck that away in the back of your head if this sounds like, oh, you're just asking me to be um, uh, to separate myself from my family. And I think you'll understand in the way I present it. I hope you'll kind of get where he's coming from. But just trust me on that. That is not Bowen's heart at all. Now, let me also just say real quick about some of the things, as you know, from a Christian perspective. When we talk about things from a Christian perspective in my classes and certainly at TKU, um, Bowen really was into Darwinistic theory and the concepts of evolution. And so I just, as you're reading through, don't flip out. Don't let that bother you too much. Truth is truth is truth is truth. I think of the scripture where Jesus said, the demons, okay, so you call me Lord and Savior and Jesus. The demons even say, I am Jesus. I am Lord. They even acknowledge it. So, okay, so that truth came from the demons, so it means it's not truth? No, absolutely not. So nobody's perfect, and regardless of the carrier of the message, I want to challenge and encourage you to look for truth, because he has some incredible insight into what really is a healthy family and a healthy individual. So one of the things that you'll learn from me, and really, I have friends who teach theory, and I've taught theory, and um, one of the things that it's important to understand is look at the person themselves and look at their experiences in life, uh, and why, in part, teaching yourself to look at yourself and understand how your upbringing, family dynamics, extended family, culture you lived in, neighborhood you lived in, city you lived in, state you lived in, country you lived in, understand how those things impact the way you view healthy and unhealthy um, problems, challenges, how to deal with them, solutions, those kinds of things. So he was the oldest of five. He was seemed to have early on taken on that stereotypical role of the oldest child being the more responsible one and being a leader. His father was a businessman, owned a funeral home, and for a short time a small department store. Um, his father was actually the mayor. He grew up in Waverly, Tennessee. So I was the mayor for a little while. Um, he had a family farm. This natural systems is important because when we talk about systems theory in counseling and psychology, systems theory did not originate in counseling and psychology. It was more of a biological sciences concept. Now, Bowen was a scientist very much, and very much a researcher, and very interested in scientific things. Not just a clinician, although I get the feeling he was pretty good clinically with his patients as well. which is a unique combination, by the way. Some scientists have poor bedside manner, so to speak, and I get the feeling that this guy was warm and understanding and worked well with people. So natural systems in terms of biology, in terms of animals, the things that they eat, and the cycle of life and certainly death. Um, Systems, even there's even a place for systems theory looking at mechanical things. So it's, it never ceases to amaze me. You can have a $50,000 car and one, $30 part quits working and the whole thing is rendered unuseful. Well, it is a system of parts and pieces that work together. And very much very similar, we can make the parallel, and this is a lot of what his research does, to how the family works together as a system. Each person in the family and extended family being one of those moving parts. And if one of those moving parts is, quote, broken or not working well, not functioning well, becomes mentally ill, then we are, it affects the entire system. I think of the scripture that talks about we are the body, and if one member hurts, we all hurt. And that's very, very, very excellent parallel with the concepts of Bowenian therapy. Um, let's see. I think I said all of this. He was at the University of Tennessee, went to med school, spent 5 years as a doctor in the Army, saw a lot of trauma in that process. They used to call it war neurosis. We would call it PTSD today. And so he became very interested in this and went from, he had a lot of questions. He went from, a little question guy there, uh, being a surgeon to psychiatry. So he went and did a residency in psychiatry. And obviously back then, this was what, 40s, 1940s, late 40s. That he did his residency. But textbook tells you exactly when. I don't really care exactly, but generally understanding the concept of back then everything psychological was Freudian psychoanalytic theory. So he was trained in that. He didn't really like it. He wasn't impressed. He didn't feel like it was scientific enough. He didn't feel like it was backed by fact and by science, which, by the way, is one of the complaints to this day widely of Freudian psychotherapy. Although Freud had some um, contributing ideas that still hold today. Um, he was, man, he read and read and read. The boy was extremely well read, looked at multiple different disciplines. He did not just study psychiatry and psychology. He looked at many, many, many different disciplines, which I believe is a good way to broaden the mind as well. So he really began to doubt psychoanalytic theory and began to question it. So began to work on some of his own ideas. He ended up at the Menninger um, clinic, and all of them were deeply steeped in psychoanalysis, Freudian style, old school. And he brought in some of his ideas and started talking about the family in terms of systems approach, very elementary beginning thoughts. And boy, he was like all but chastised and kicked out. He left. He's like, yeah, I'm good. I think I get it. This is not a good fit for me anymore. So he left. He went to the National Institute of Mental Health. He did worked in an inpatient setting there, worked with schizophrenics and their families, actually ended up hospitalizing other family members with them. Really early on, focused primarily on the relationship between mother and children. Started really actually with mother and daughter, and I think some of that was the times, right? But some of that was because dads were viewed as distant and outsiders, and very commonly in that culture, in the culture in America at that time, not nearly as involved as they are today, or hopefully are. Certainly, culturally, my expectation is that the dads are very involved. We change diapers, we burp babies, we bounce babies on our knee, we play with babies, we teach them, we read to them, we do all these things. And sure, I'm sure there's fathers in the 30s and 40s and 50s and forever that have done that with their children, but societally and culturally, largely in America, the father was viewed as an outsider. I want to say as he grew in his theory that he softened on that, that he did have openness to the impact of the father. But that's where his focus started, was the mother-daughter relationship. And as that last line, he did begin to look at the entire family later. So you can see this evolving. There's that word evolution. Oh no, everybody run, scream, gnashing of teeth, pull your hair. His concept evolved into a more sophisticated way of thinking. I know I hate that word too. If any of you are like, oh. So let's see. There was this concept. He began to see this. One of the terms in systems theory, he doesn't use it, I don't think, is enmeshed. ENMESHED, enmeshed. People being overly dependent upon each other. We would also call this codependency. I want you to understand the difference between dependency and codependency, and it's real simple. People misuse this term more than any psychological term I know of. Maybe not, but it's a bit of a uh, soapbox of mine, so forgive me, but I won't go on and on. Dependency is I depend on you, I need you. Codependency is I need you to need me. And usually there's a codependent person and an independent person connected. So think about that. The independent person is over here doing their own thing, quote, using the codependent person because the codependent person needs to be needed. And all this obviously happening subconsciously most of the time, unless they go to counseling and begin to figure that out. Um, so began to talk about the family as a system or a unit in very connected ways, in other words, but he also then started focusing on what does it mean to differentiate? How do you define yourself in the midst of and the concept of the family and having this, I am me and you are you. You're going to hold some beliefs that others don't, and that's impenetrable. And other beliefs of yours will be affected greatly by those around you. And depending on your level of, as Bowen would say, differentiation, you may be too susceptible to the influence of others or not enough acceptable. He talks a lot about a continuum of overly independent and different, which would be extreme differentiation, and uh, overly dependent and overly independent. Sorry, I got lost in my words there. Um, Another thing that's interesting, and again, I think biblical, right? So sins of your father are passed down from generations to generation to the fourth generation. And so he began to look back 3 generations and later said, as much as possible, I'd like to look back as far as, 6, 7, 8 generations if possible. Looking for what? Looking for family patterns and relationships and things that he believed uh, got passed down from generation to generation, and helps explain why a current family is the way they are today. We already talked about it being misunderstood. Um, so, and there's going to be like descriptors and symptoms of and reasons for, just kind of peppered throughout, pepper spray, peppered throughout this. So when you see this, one symptom of like, oh, he's fixing to go into a whole list of symptoms. No, we're going to touch on things as the textbook picks them up. So people speaking for other people, I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but I want you to think about your family. Does your mom speak for your dad? Does your mom speak for the whole family? Do you have siblings that speak for each other? This is a differentiation problem, a symptom of a differentiation problem. So I look at families. I want you to think about pictures of your own family, and I want you to think in terms of what you see here. And I'm going to point out one thing that I see. I'm sorry, a couple of things that I see. So this guy is closest to mom and dad. I'm going to assume this is mom and dad. I'm going to say this is one of their adult sons or son-in-laws. This is a daughter or daughter-in-law. This is a son or a son-in-law. This is a daughter or daughter-in-law. Y'all can laugh at me now, right? I don't know. This is just for the purposes of this this talk, just humor me. So where is this guy's wife is one question, right? Um, I guess here they sure look cuddly, so I'm kind of thinking that might be husband and wife, right? Uh, and we don't really know whose kids are whose, other than we're going to assume this little girl is this dad, that's her daddy, because she's holding on to him. But really, we don't really have any idea. Maybe this is his wife, and she's just over with the kids, right? So is this a triangulation between triangulation? That's a maybe a new thought for you, but we're getting into that. But is this father daughter against mom? Now, some of you bristle when I say that. You're like, oh, it's, is it really that harsh? Is it really that ugly? Well, doesn't mean they don't love each other. Doesn't mean they don't work things out. But yeah, sometimes it can be. Um, these poor kids lost, and this kid's connected to mom, and this kid's connected to dad. Yeah, I don't know. And I'm not saying that I'm accurate on any of this, but I want you to think. So I had a person show me a picture of his family one time, and they were underneath a shade tree, and literally his dad was like one step back in the shadows of the shade tree, and he said that is a perfect description. It was my dad was always on the outside. So pictures can be very telling, and then sometimes you can read more into it. But if you know a family and you know the situation and you look at a picture, it's like, you can see stuff if you look for stuff. And one of the things I'm trying to teach you to do, regardless of what you do, whether you're in a church as a pastor or minister of some kind in a church, or if you are going to be a professional counselor or a stay-at-home mom or whatever you end up being, all of the above, beautiful and powerful, I want you to be learn to look at things differently. I want you to learn to see stuff that other people don't necessarily see. Some of you that comes natural, and some of you that is something that you're going to have to uh, work on and develop. Okay, he also applied his theory to his own family, which I think is kind of cool. He was trying stuff out and trying to um, grow his understanding based on the kinds of things that happened in his own family. I'm not saying that he performed therapy on his own family, but he used the concepts in his relationships and as he attempted to differentiate from his parents primarily and from other family members and extended family members, that he used his concepts. Also, I want you to think about times you've talked about fond memories, right? History. He began to really emphasize that and recognize that, hey, this is important. We have history together. We have memories together. We have situations that we can talk about that really helped form a connection between us. And we can wisely use that to our advantage to build relationships with people. It reminds me of the early on concept of uh, shared attention. If you took developmental psychology or human development or human growth and development, whatever it was called, uh, hopefully your textbook went through this concept of uh, um, shared attention. It starts very early in very small children. I want to say even pre-toddler, where the baby looks at you and looks at something, and it's pre-verbal and goes, and looks back at you like, right? And you're supposed to share that moment with them, like, yeah, that's awesome. You don't even know, like, I don't know what you're even pointing at, but yeah, that's cool, right? And that creates a bond. And so that's our history. We have those moments. We can come together later and talk about things, not the 6-month-old pointing at something, not those things, but we that's the foundation of that, the importance of history. I hope that made sense to y'all. It did to me, but there you go. So what is triangulation? Have you ever heard the concept, man, I got sucked in, right? My family's craziness. They were all yelling and screaming, or they were game playing and poking and stabbing or talking about something or whatever, and I got sucked in. You got triangulated in. You were part of a triangulation. Um, Triangulation in real simple terms is, let's say my child comes to me and says, hey, Dad, can I go out Friday night with so and so? And I say, not real thrilled about that. And she goes to mom and says, hey, mom, help me work on dad. I want to go out. Or dad, mom, can I go out? She says, sure. Okay, help me work on dad because dad doesn't want me to go out. Now we have a triangle. We have three people involved in this, right? The correct thing to do at that moment is to say, no, no, no. That's not how this works. You teach your child that early on, hopefully. Dad and I will discuss it and we'll come back to you privately. We'll come back to you with a decision as to whether you can go or not. Again, you're still stuck somewhat because if you come back and say yes, my wife won in the kid's mind, and you come back and say no, dad won in the kid's mind. So it's tough. I mean, the triangles are there. I mean, it's just reality. Sometimes it's parents against kids, kids against parents, kids and one parent against the other parent. There's all kinds of, and triangulations can be more than, it doesn't just have to be three people, right? So you could have five kids and dad, and that would be the kids here, dad here. That's 2 points of the triangle, and mom over here. That's the third point of the triangle, and there's your triangle. So don't get confused with, well, what if there's more than three? How can it be a triangle? Yes, it gets very complex, or can get complex. One of the questions to ask yourself also is, so here's another one. The concept is, in this triangulation process, working with other people in your family, one example of taking on more responsibility than is yours, are you responsible for the happiness of everybody in your family? Usually if you feel responsible for one person's happiness, you feel responsible for everybody's happiness. And so you've got all these triangles going on between you and them. But that's always in terms of just general healthy. Am I healthy? Am I taking on more responsibility than is mine? When I'm a kid, my mom and dad's mental health, my mom and dad's relationship with one another is not my responsibility. Whether they're happy or sad, content or in discontent, that is their responsibility. They're adults. And parents are responsible to come in and teach their kid that and say, hey, don't worry about us. We're good. We'll work this out. And sometimes parents go to the kid for help with their emotional problems, like they should go to a spouse. Very, very, very unhealthy. I hope you guys are listening and looking at your own family as we talk about this and taking notes, going, oh, aha, that's in my family, right? I didn't even know that, but there it is, yeah. And write that down for your paper that you're going to write here. I think it's due at the end of week 4. Don't hold me to that. You're going to go look at the syllabus. Okay, and he also he began to move from individual counseling, individual therapy, and he said we treat the family, not the individual. So he would say there's no such thing as a sick individual outside of the context of the family. Okay, here's his 8 concepts, and we will go mostly today. We're going to talk about differentiation of self. We'll talk a little bit about triangulation and some of the others, but this is just a peek ahead. And by the way, some of you have asked, well, what about this little book? This is a good book to. This is a good book for you to read, even if you just brush over and help you understand. It's short and quick and easy. Help you understand these 8 concepts of Bowenian therapy. This is the main book. So I've had people ask me, which book are we reading now? This is Titleman, or Tittleman. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And this is the main book in the syllabus. When I say from the textbook, this is what I mean. This is the big one, it's thicker, and the other one is the little one. I hope that helps some of you. Okay, so think as you go through this process. Think about yourself, think about your family, think about the dynamics. There's 2 distinct forces going on inside of us, and he would say instinctively, and instinct is kind of I'm okay with the term instinct because we have instincts, but it's kind of a Darwinian thought word. That's always kind of a buzzword for evolution, like, oh, so he's an evolutionist. Well, he was pretty big fan of evolution, which saddens me, but because I love Bowen so much. But again, he had some good stuff to say. So we are these 2 things appear, togetherness and individuality, appear to be at odds with one another, but they don't really necessarily have to be completely at odds with one another. And our task, we think about this on a continuum of extremes. If you're extremely overly together with people, or if you're extremely over separated from people, then you're unhealthy. So we're talking about balance, balance, Daniel-san, balance. If you don't know where that comes from, sorry. Uh, system. I misspelled the word, the emotional system. Sorry. These are the four basic concepts: the feeling system and the intellectual system. And again, more detail about that in the textbook. We'll touch on some of these concepts in greater depth as time goes by. um, so, what exactly is the differentiation of self? So, think about an infant where there is no um, separation, but there's no me and mom. It's just in the infant's mind, as far as we can understand it, and most psychologists would agree, there is no differentiation. There's a sense of there's the infant does not have the ability that I'm here, I'm me, and you're you. And this is a large part of what the 2-year-old know and do it myself, and I tie my shoes, and I dress myself, and all that stuff comes from they are attempting to establish some level of independence. In order to survive in our world, we have to have some level of ability to do things on our own. Translation: dependence or autonomy. Autonomy being a fancy word for freedom, but a little different twist of meaning there. Um, so there is this break from emotional dependency or infusion. Fusion, he says, emotional fusion is the terminology he uses. Think about 2 years old. Um, here, this third point is really important. How good is mom and dad, I would say, at how good is mom and dad at um, allowing a child to establish some independence? So does mom and dad teach small children? And it can be things as simple as, do you want to wear these blue jeans or these blue jeans? You hold them up. Do you want to wear your red coat or your blue coat? Right. So helping little bitty children make independent decisions on things that really don't matter that much to us, although we act like, it's the end of the world if our kids don't match perfectly or whatever, which I don't get, but that's craziness, but it's out there. I mean, I want my kids to look decent, but I know some of y'all are like, "Rah, rah, rah, rah." Okay, give me a break, work with me. Okay, so how good are you as a parent? How good were your parents at allowing you? I can't tell you how many people I've said, man, I never made a decision. I mean, they're sitting there in their 20s looking at me saying, I'm dying here. I've never made a decision in my life. I mean, nothing significant when it comes to, I mean, mom and dad made all my decisions for me. I'm like, oh, okay, Houston, we have a problem. This is bad. This is real bad. We can get beyond it, but a person has to learn how to make decisions on their own. Um, I heard a parenting story where the teenager and the father, good relationship, boy, teenage boy, and uh, his parents did not buy him a car, but allowed him to use one of the family cars. And he said, your curfew is X, whatever your curfew is, and if you're late, you don't get to use the car next weekend at all. I'm like, okay. So I'll agree, got it, cool, no problem. So his son comes home about 30 minutes past curfew one night. And so instead of getting angry, the dad's like, okay, so talk to me. What happened? He goes, Dad, he said, I literally looked at the consequence, and I looked at like I can leave now and be home on time, or I can stay a little bit longer and not have the car next weekend, and I'm okay with that. He said, I met the most amazing, the most amazing girl. And the dad's like, cool, tell me about her. He still didn't get the car next weekend, right? But he was able to have allow his son, in other words, you're like, what does this have to do with anything? This has to do with this bullet point number 3, the parent's ability. I'm expanding it to the parent's ability. Remember, he focused heavily on the mom. The parent's ability to allow the child to grow and to make decisions and to gain some level of independence. Man, I applaud both the teenager and the dad in that scenario. Oh, if we could always be that good of parents. I'm gonna be a lot better grandparent than I was a parent. I think. I hope. Whew, okay. So this fusion and independence and this level of differentiation is not just about the family or just about the individual. Bullet number 4 here, right? So it shows up both in the individual and the family. It's going on in the individual's head, and it is going on in other family members' head, and everything impacts everything, each direction, like a pinball machine where it's just right. It's all over the place. If the process is successful, then we have this formation of self, a healthy self. And again, it kind of is a battle between individuality and togetherness, balance, continuum. I hope y'all are going, yeah, I've heard you say that already, Professor Fairchild, like 15 times. Good. We'll say it about 15 more before the day is over, and another 300 before the semester is over. So really, I want you to think in terms of balance. Now, here's a cultural, right? So when you're evaluating me, they're going to say, did he intertwine the material into cultural issues? Yes, he did, because culturally, you need to understand that where you fall on this continuum is going to be different from culture to culture, and that's okay. There are some cultures that are by the way, the term is individualistic and collectivistic, right? So individualistic is very individualized, kind of old school American. Collectivistic is very almost everywhere else in the world. There you go. In other words, a kid thinks to himself, individualistic young man or young woman thinks to themselves, where do I want to go to college? Um, well, and they follow that up in their thoughts maybe with, I'm not really looking for where mom and dad want me to go to college. I don't care where they want me to go to college. I love my mom and dad, and that's great and that's fine, but it's really not about where my mom and dad want me to go to college. It's where do I think I should go to college, and where do I want to go to college? That's individualistic, and a collectivistic is going to go straight to where do mom and dad want me to go to college, and why? Where do mom and dad want me to live after I graduate from college? Um, so those concepts are going to put the point on the continuum from left to right at very different places. Okay, so keep that in mind, and as a backdrop of what we're talking about here. So any questions? Anybody? Any comments? I just love it. Let's see. Oh, he talks a lot about feeling processes and intellectual processes. So early on, it's all just a feeling thing, and really part of that is just because developmentally there's not much capacity for intellectual processes, and becomes much more of an intellectual process. He also says we need to be able to recognize the difference between a feeling process and an intellectual process. Let me say that a different way. Am I making this decision based on my emotions, or am I making this decision based on intellectually thinking it through? That's what he means by that. I said this already, but I want to reemphasize it. Self is defined within the context of the family system. And other systems, by the way, and we're affected by our work life, our school life, our communities, our friend groups, those kinds of things. These are all systems. One really a part of one big system, but they're all little systems that we interact with. And there's no self without others. These are not exclusive things. Another couple more important concepts are pseudo self and solid self. Pseudo self is a mask, is a fake. I'm saying these things and acting this way to please my mom and dad, or to please my spouse, or to please whomever. Solid self would be those core values and beliefs that no matter what people say or do around you, you will not change them. There is, by the way, a list on page 61 in the Titleman book, and I want you to look over that list. It is a list of having to do with conversations to be had with and things to do to make and create healthy families. As you move through this process, I'd like to see you try some of those things out with your family members, and in particular for your paper coming up. Okay, that is the last slide. Woohoo! Hallelujah! Look at that. Isn't that cute, baby? I got babies on my mind right now, right? So I'm just like, oh, look. Yeah, so no individuality there. It's all about oneness with mama, hopefully, and daddy. But we'll begin to develop a sense of differentiation and individuality or self as time goes by, very gradually and very slowly. Okay, again, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, text me, email me, whatever you need to do, and I will see you on the next video. And God bless. Thank you. Bye.